människor.
Modiga människor.
Modiga människor.
Yeah, hello and welcome to the channel Modiga Människor, which in English means brave people. And this is episode 165. And my name is Soja Zachariasdotter. And with me live from Nebraska, I have the midwife Angee Hock. So I will introduce her to you now. So, hello, Angee.
Hello.
I mean, it took a while to actually make this interview happen, and I'm very glad that you're with us.
Well, I'm very honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and for the audience here in Sweden, I guess most of the people haven't heard about your story. I kind of fell over it in a video clip and parts from your trial, and yeah, and that's a long story, and I really want you to tell it. But first of all, because you work as a midwife, I just want you to tell us a little about your background and the beginning of and the love for this job.
Absolutely. So I was born and raised in Nebraska. I'm actually almost a 10th generation Nebraskan. My love for birth, or my intrigue for birth, actually started as a child. I grew up with friends who had unassisted births. They were just groups of families that attended each other's births. There was no formal midwife there. My mom was not an unassisted birther, however, but her friends were. And so I grew up knowing that there were a variety of ways that women could choose to give birth. Some gave birth in a hospital, some gave birth at home. And that was my first, exposure to the home birth community, and my first, intrigue about birth. And then when I became pregnant with my own, I actually was researching and started working as a pregnancy doula, meaning that I didn't attend births at that time, but I helped women like formalize birth plans and know their options before actually having their birth. Then in about 2013 or 12 actually, is when I started doing actual in-hospital doula work, and I started attending births. That actually quickly turned into attending unassisted births as a doula, where I would just not do anything medical. I would just be there to support the women, give them a drink of water, help with cleanup afterwards, those type of things. And my call to midwifery started in 2013 after my fourth baby was born. He was born in a hospital with a certified nurse midwife, and I realized that not all midwives were actually for women or with women. And that was actually my start to saying, you know what, Nebraska needs more options, and I'm going to be one of them. And so I started studying in 2013. And I decided on doing traditional midwifery work. Here in Nebraska, we are unregulated. There's no law about certified professional midwives or traditional midwives. The only law exists around the only law exists around certified nurse midwives, saying they cannot attend home births. It's actually a felony for them. But there's no mention of any other midwife. So I decided on traditional midwifery. I opened my doors as providing solo services as a traditional midwife in 2017.
Yeah, fantastic. The story that we're gonna talk about today is it in 18 that it happened?
Because 2019 actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
So on the way there, Can you tell us a little about what actually happened?
Yes, I can.
Mm.
So in June 2019, I was working with a family. This was my second time serving them, and it was a planned home birth, and we discovered at the end of labor or towards the end of labor that baby had flipped breech. I gave the parents all their options, and they had chosen to stay home for the time being at that point. Um, and so everything progressed as normal, and but it was long, and the mom did get tired, and she was like, okay, I think I'm ready for transfer, but first I want to use the bathroom. So she went into the bathroom. Is about 15 minutes. She just wanted to sit there a little bit and just kind of gather herself, maybe labor down a little bit, and then when she called me into the room, she was having a baby. And then it was unfortunate incident where the baby was in a complicated breech position, not what we would see in a normal breech position. And so we called 911, and EMS came. And unfortunately, the baby, dear Vera, did not survive.
Yeah.
She was actually born en route to the hospital.
And it's just very sad and tragic situation, of course.
It was, yes. Well, it still is. It was a very tragic situation, very devastating for all of us.
Hmm.
So, and it was very, very much a surprise because everything was going so well up until that point.
Yeah, but this had very big consequences for you as a person.
It did. Nebraska has a long history of harassing midwives across the board. And in fact, it stems back from about 125 years ago when they first started issuing cease and desist on midwives. Since then, there have been midwives with receiving threats, with cease and desist orders, and getting prosecuted and receiving jail time. And the law enforcement was very quick to try to push blame on myself, and I was charged with willful child neglect resulting in death. I was jailed for 3 days and released on bail, where it was about 3.5 years until trial, which I just finished trial December of 2022.
Hmm. Yeah, and I saw that clip from the court, and I, I mean, as a person, how did you caught up with all this? I mean, 3.5 years. It's a long
Yeah.
time, and I also know that during this time you got pregnant.
Yes. So when we lost Vera, I had a 9-month-old, my fifth 9-month-old, and then during the process of the legal battle, I had my sixth child, a little girl named Avalon. So it was a very hard time, and well, still is. There's a lot of aftermath coming from the trial, but it was a very difficult time where we were constantly facing threats. We had received a lot of hate mail, death threats. Um, it was very stressful on my sixth pregnancy and birth, for sure, and very much a big strain financially, spiritually, emotionally, physically. It really did take a toll on myself as well as my husband and my family. My children also suffered trauma because right after um, the death, law enforcement actually had a search warrant to search my home, and my kids were home alone, and they forced entry into the house. And my kids, my oldest was 14 at the time, and just the effects on that, and on her of having to experience that. They actually patted her down and disarmed her of her pocket knife she had in her pocket. And yeah, it was hard because I was actually away at the time, and I was at a meeting. I was out of town actually with my fifth, and I couldn't get back home to protect my kids. And thankfully, my husband came right home. He was about 15 minutes away. But then just seeing the effect that had on them, it was horrifying for all of us, for sure. During this time, also, the state of Nebraska issued 2 cease and desists on me, neither of which are actually relevant or apply to me, but just to keep the threats going and the fear going. And that was really, really hard as well. So there was a lot of pretrial hearings, most of which I didn't have to attend, but occasionally I did. And then there was a lot of postponing and delaying of things due to different circumstances. We had COVID in there, of course, which affected a lot of things in the court. So it was a very long, drawn out, and hard process going through it. During the trial, I can go into the trial unless you have some questions before we get there.
No. I would really like you to tell about the trial. Yeah.
When we finally saw trial, I was very ready to see trial. We had anticipated this moment, and I knew from the get-go that I needed to see trial. Up until this point, there hadn't been a midwife in the state of Nebraska who actually saw trial. They always dropped the case beforehand. And I thought, if we could get a midwife, if I could see trial and get a non-guilty verdict, then maybe that would set some sort of precedent and get the ball rolling in Nebraska. And so I had a feeling that's just where we were going. And sure enough, that's where we went. And, during this time, during all these 3 years, really my solid rock was my faith in Jesus Christ. And with that, I felt very prepared for trial with a lot of prayer and fasting. And there wasn't anything in trial that was really a surprise to me. There was things that were really, hard to hear, statements from the OB who really didn't understand what home birth is about, who really didn't understand the type of care provided women. But I expected that from her, because she's only been trained one way, and that is in the Western medical system. And so, I understand her viewpoint and why she said things that she said, even though I don't agree with them and they are foundationally untrue. But there was nothing that was really a surprise to me. So I was able to keep a peace through the trial, that, the truth was going to come out. The truth was going to come out one way or another. And this is just something that I had to endure. And looking back now, I'm actually very, very grateful for the experience of going through that trial. It wasn't easy. I had a lot of hate messages during that time. It was on Court TV, which is probably where you saw it. And with that, a lot of comments at the beginning, and a lot of comments negatively at the beginning. But it was really interesting, because in the midweek of the trial, all of a sudden I could see the tides starting to turn with the opinion of the people, and even the opinion of Court TV themselves, where they thought that I was this horrible person that represented myself, when in fact, the truth came out, particularly in the father's testimony, that I didn't misrepresent myself at all, that I was exactly who I said I was, and provided the services that I exactly said I would provide to this family. And that there was this trust and loving relationship there between both of us. And so you could really see people starting to understand, like, wow, this is not what I thought it was. This midwife is not evil or who we thought she was, but actually was very caring and supportive of these families, gave them their options, understood the training, understood the circumstances. So you could see the opinions of the people starting to turn during there. And I started to get love messages, support messages, encouraging messages, basically the rest of the time, along with the hate mail. There's always those haters out there, right? Um, so, but you could really see the attitudes starting to shift from a public perspective. In the courtroom, you could see the energy slightly, but the prosecution was pretty. They appeared to be pretty hard-hearted about it, and they weren't going to change their mind. I mean, they were in it to find me guilty, so nothing was going to change their mind about that. But in the end, I did have a non-guilty verdict with a actual red verdict, which is very rare. Most judges who find a person not guilty do not explain their verdict, but this judge did, which I had been praying for and fasting for a long time. And through this verdict, we actually set a U.S. court precedent of recognizing home birth as a constitutional parental right. And that has never been done in a United States court system before. So we did walk away with that, which is absolutely amazing. The judge also reaffirmed my training as a traditional midwife, which is pretty rare for a judge to really dabble into that. And also recognizing, the broad spectrum of parental choice, which was very affirming. And really the verdict was more of with having those amazing things in it, it really was a roadmap to show me where he sees the weak points of midwifery and birthing rights here in Nebraska, and things that we need to work on from a legislative perspective to really shore up those parental rights, parental birthing rights, to make sure that these families and the people serving them are standing on their rights and have the right to do this.
There's so many things in this. I mean, one of the things is that because I also listened to this interview in Indie Birth with you, and something I really took with me from that interview was that you felt so strongly, and you said that here too, that this needed to be done, but you were never afraid because you just followed your calling, and that really made a big impact on me, because I think that's the only way to change things.
Absolutely. That is one thing, is I wasn't afraid. If I were found guilty, the maximum sentence was 20 years in prison. That's big. I would have missed out on most of my kids' growing up, particularly the 4 younger ones. But yet I wasn't afraid. I wasn't afraid because I knew that this was God's will for me. I wish, we always wish things could be different. I wish it didn't come about with having to lose a baby. That's horrible. It's horrible, and just the trauma of that itself was a lot. I wish it didn't have to come that way, but it did, and I knew what I was supposed to do, and that was to stand up, and to face this head on and not be afraid, because I knew that no matter what happened, I was going to be in the will of God. And if it would be ending with me in 20 years in prison, then I would still be in the will of God, and I would be doing everything I can from that perspective. Even when I was in jail for 3 days, I actually initiated Douglas County Jail's first lactation program in 3 days' time. Because I was lactating myself. My 9-month-old was still exclusively breastfed, and my lawyer advocated for me to bring a breast pump into jail, which had never been done in that jail. But the captain, who was a very much a supporter of women, really wanted to get a lactation program going. And she thought I would be a good fit. So she allowed me to bring a manual pump without any metal parts into the jail, and I was their first one to initiate their lactation program. And that was just in 3 days' time. We whatever comes our way, we do our best in the calling we're given, and we take the opportunities we can, while we're there. That wasn't a great situation, but yet that was paving the way for other women who end up going to jail for whatever reason and who are lactating to actually have some support where they can actually continue to pump. And not have to go through engorgement and possibly mastitis. So, just you do the best you can with what comes your way, and take the opportunities that you can.
Yeah, I just think that with God on your side and the belief, you can actually move mountains. I mean, it's I don't know what to say, but I mean, in this crazy situation, I mean, I can really sense that you had this faith with you all the time. This situation wouldn't have happened if the Nebraska society, or I don't know what to call it, but there is I've been trying to put myself in this. I didn't know that it was like this in Nebraska before I came in contact with you, and I mean, it's huge. It's a very bad situation, and this is, I mean, it's like a witch hunt on not only midwives, but I mean on women. They're not allowed to choose. So I mean, this what you're doing is so much bigger.
It really is, and Nebraska is not alone in that. There are many states in the U.S. that women, birth professionals, have been harassed by the government. Parents, mothers have been harassed by the government, sending threatening letters from Child Protective Services because they chose to have a home birth. Parents terrified of taking their kids into the doctor, their healthy babies, after a home birth because they'll be turned in. It happens more frequently than we realize. And that's the sad situation, is there's just so much misinformation and such a lack of respect among parents and among women in general, and among birth professionals that choose an alternate way of doing things. It's more of this mindset, particularly in the United States, that you do things the medical model, the Western medical model, and you don't deviate from that, because if you do, then you're stepping out of line. And really, it's very, very sad, because then people, might think, might want to choose an alternate route, but they're afraid. And then those that do choose an alternate route sometimes suffer those repercussions from the state, because medical professionals turn them in, or somebody turns them in. I know for myself, since starting midwifery, I've had 3 investigations on me before this case came about, and it wasn't because of a bad outcome. It was not because of a complaint of a family. It was literally people were finding out that I was attending home births and just turning me into Health and Human Services. One of them was at a baby shower. The mom hadn't even had her baby yet, and somebody at the baby shower found out I was going to be the midwife attending and called it in. And there was another case of a woman who had a home birth and went in for the ROGAM shot afterwards. And I got turned in, even though I didn't attend the home birth. I don't know who this woman is. So, those type of things where they were just, they're out for blood, where, they're just trying to pin these home births on, or anyone that chooses alternate routes of how to, you know, or to birth their babies or to raise their children. They're just trying to find somebody responsible, whoever that might be. So it really is a devastating situation.
But how come that we are so far away from our own history? I mean, we have been given birth to children forever, and suddenly it's just this medical issue, and you're not allowed to do anything that's kind of more natural. It's a horrible situation. And,
Yes.
and it's starting to come here in Sweden too. I mean, I know several midwives that actually just were kicked out on the day because they are listening to the women and not following, like, they are not doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
But they're not behaving the way the hospital wants and the rules.
Right. So, well, and when we look at, you know, the attack on midwives, and birth in general, you know, this fight is really nothing new. I mean, the first recorded time in history actually is in the Bible in Exodus, where the Hebrews were enslaved to the Egyptians, and the Pharaoh commanded the Hebrew midwives to kill every baby boy born in order to limit their population because the Hebrews were outnumbering the Egyptians and they were afraid of an uprising. And, you know, so that's the first time we see really a government structure infiltrating in birth and infiltrating with midwives and trying to tell them what to do in the best interest of the government, not in the best interest of the people or the families. So, and that's also where we see the first rebellion of midwives, really, because they refused. They refused to do it. And, you know, and they were actually blessed for that, blessed by God for that. You know, so really, and we see this actually throughout history. We see this, you know, in China, years ago in the 1980s. And, you know, so we see this, you know, variation throughout history of the government really trying to take control of midwives and thus control of families and trying to control the birthing process. And it's, you know, yeah, it's a horrible thing because the government really just needs to stay out of it because they have, you know, no right to be meddling in family affairs and in birth in general. And, you know, midwives serve the people, they serve the women, they serve the families. Depending on what type of midwife you hire, many midwives, you know, are with the women basically from womb to tomb. And they serve in not just in birth, but serve in wholeness and wellness throughout the family's lives, even to the end where they also can sit with the ones who are dying and provide care. And so, you know, it's midwives have such an amazing impact on family and culture, and empowering the family to live to their full wholeness potential. And honestly, I feel like the government tries to squash that because a healthy whole people is has their own free ideas, and free thinking.
I just unmuted because there's someone who woke up here. It's very late here in Sweden, so
Yes.
yeah. And I guess the big sister fell asleep also then. Yeah. Men, oh, I kind of so I need to just focus. So if I Angee, are you hopeful for the future with all this happening? Can you really see that things are going to change? I mean, the case for you was obviously very, very big. It's a big thing.
Well, you know, in general, there's always hope. you know, that, and when we look at culture, there's always a swing, you know. I'm convinced, and just seeing what I've read in history books and seeing what I've seen is, you know, there's really nothing new under the sun. You know, there's always been evil in the world. There's always been corruption, but yet there's always been good, and there's always been triumph, and there's always been victory. And a lot of times, you know, in specific cultures, we see this pendulum swing back and forth. So there's absolutely hope for the future, and I'm hoping, you know, with actually getting through trial and seeing the verdict, that there is hope in Nebraska. And I hope it just doesn't stay in Nebraska, but spreads nationwide and even internationally, where really we can fine tune into parental birthing rights and really solidify the respect for birthing families that they absolutely deserve. And I think we can absolutely get there. It takes time and it takes effort. It takes, you know, a lot of people being on the same page and loving one individual person. You know, that this is the thing, is when we look at people who have impacted the world the most for good, you know, they started by loving people one by one. And I think I read a book recently, and I think it was Mother Teresa who said that, you know, somebody asked her how you change the world, and she's like, loving one by one. You know, she didn't set out to change the world. She didn't set out to become famous. She just started loving on people one by one. And really that's what it boils down to, is loving and showing kindness and respect to each individual person, and raising that elevation and that way of thinking, so that way it's contagious, because joy is contagious, kindness is contagious, just like negativity and evil really is contagious. It's all contagious. So, you know, sharing that kindness and that gratefulness along with the information. I mean, the education is important by far, but approaching it with loving kindness and gentleness to people really gets people to understand the aspects of where we're coming from, and that we're not asking everyone to really believe it. You know, for those that don't necessarily want to birth at home, we're not asking them to believe that they should birth at home, because that's not the case. It's just more of understand why other people choose a different route that maybe someone else would choose, and be open to that and respect their way of thinking. It really just comes down to being kind and respectful and listening to each other.
I just if we go back to this this topic, giving birth at home, it's vad heter det? It's people there's so much strong feelings about it, and because I wanted to give birth to my third baby, now it didn't happen because of things, but I just remembering telling people about it, and I mean most of the people were kind of negative. Yeah, it's the first. Have you really thought about it? I mean, it's dangerous, and it's like the first thing people think about. Do you?
I think I lost you.
I can see you.
Hello?
Hello? I see you.
Hello?
Yeah. Do you hear me?
Ah, there you are. I don't know
Yeah.
what happened. Internet seemed to get patchy a little bit. But I don't know what happened, because I had full bars. So I was like, oh, I'm not sure what's going on, but something.
Yeah.
So, but I
Yeah,
didn't hear much
yeah,
after you said that you're wanting to have your third
yeah,
attempt,
yeah,
that people were
yeah,
questioning you and like, have you thought about it? Like, really
yeah,
thought about it? You know, what
yeah.
if something goes wrong? Those type of things.
Yeah, and I just wonder how I mean, for not so long ago, most of the people actually gave birth at home.
Right.
And I mean, and now when you want to give birth at home, even though there is, I mean, there is a lot of communities and people counseling this, I mean, home midwives and but it's still, it's so rare, it's so few people, and the belief system is very negative.
Yes.
Even though we know that most of the things and the interventions, it actually is at the hospital.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Exactly. So, with that, part of that I really feel is because women don't attend other women's births like they used to. Yes, 200 years ago and before, from the beginning of time up to about 200 years ago, women primarily gave birth at home, and young girls experienced many births before they actually birthed themselves. And so, birth was very much a normal biological physiological process. Um, that very rarely went wrong. Like, yes, there were times that things did go wrong. But for the most part, it's beautiful and it happens beautifully if we don't interfere. But then when, about 200, about 150 years ago here in the US, I don't know about Europe, but that's when doctors saw the opportunity to really make money and to monopolize the birth process. And so they started spreading around rumors of how all these things could go wrong, and women started going to the hospital, and birth became this big mystery because girls weren't experiencing other women's births like they used to. And so birth was this big unknown and very scary, and the doctors were all about what could go wrong. And then, at the hospital with all the interventions, a lot of times, hospitals create the problems that they have to fix. So now all we hear is the horror stories of, when you go to a baby shower, it's just devastating to me when women start talking about their horror warrior birth stories. About like a war story. It's horrifying instead of the beautiful process it was created to be. And yet they walk away feeling grateful that they were at the hospital because they needed X, Y, and Z intervention, when in reality, if they hadn't been there in the first place, I would say up to 75% of women wouldn't have needed those interventions to begin with. So, because once you intervene, it's like a snowball that rolls downhill. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And when you start messing with the process, you have to keep messing with it. Um, and yeah, and a lot of it too is, doctors trying to play God. You know, they want births to happen on a certain timeline because it's coming close to a holiday or whatnot. At least we struggle with that here in the U.S. Our induction and cesarean rates go through the roof the week before Thanksgiving, the week before Christmas, because doctors want to induce these women that are due around that time because they don't want to be called away from their families. And it's just heartbreaking to me because it's like, well, you kind of get into the birth world, you're going to get called out at any moment. Like if you don't want to be on call over holidays, maybe you shouldn't be an OB. So, um, you know, and so it's really, really sad. So I think, there's a lot of things that play into that where women are not knowledgeable about the birth process, and that they're told the horror stories, and that, we intervene so much now in a hospital scenario. And we've created this monster, but the thing about it is the monster can come down. It's going to take a lot, and it's going to take a while because we're dealing with a root that's about 150 to 200 years old. But it can happen, and it is happening. We're seeing home birth on the rise, particularly with COVID, and that is so encouraging, because women are actually waking up when COVID hit, at least here in the U.S., and they started realizing the restrictions. Some hospitals wouldn't let their own partners in. They wouldn't let any other birth professional, like a doula, in. It really was an eye-opener to women of, wait a minute, we do not want to be controlled like this during our birth. We're going to have our babies at home then. And so we're starting to see things turn, and I hope we keep going down that road where women realize the power behind their choice of birth and how it affects their baby, themselves, and their whole family. And I do want to say, because we talk a lot of negativity on the hospital system. I'm not against hospitals. I'm not against westernized medicine. It is very much a tool. And I tell people a tool used appropriately is so beneficial. Everything is a tool. And tools can be life-saving. But, what I also tell people is a tool used inappropriately is devastating. If you use a chainsaw to hammer a nail into a wall, you're going to do some damage type scenario. And that's how I look at westernized medicine is, when we need it, when we've exhausted all of our holistic options and we need the medical model of care, we are so incredibly grateful that it's there and that we do have those tools that can be used appropriately. But those tools should not be our first resort, because humans in general were made to birth. They were made to heal. They were made to recover, and things were put on this earth to help facilitate that, natural things. And so it's like going to that first before we choose westernized medicine, but yet knowing that westernized medicine is always a tool in the toolbox and used appropriately can be very beneficial. But you have to have that knowledge and you have to have that wisdom and that guidance to be able to facilitate when is the appropriate time to use that tool and when is not.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you said this about the awakening for the women, because I was thinking about that, because it feels like women are starting to remember, because every woman know how to give birth. Yeah, and we know it's in our system. We just know.
Yeah,
Just need to activate it.
Yeah, it's our cellular imprinting, our ancestor cellular imprinting. And so women they know how to give birth, and they know how to give birth well. And babies know how to be born. That's another thing that we don't realize is, yes, women know how to give birth, but babies know how to get themselves born. And that's not to say every case is, every birth is perfectly flawless. It is absolutely not. Because we live in a fallen world and things happen. But for the most part, and when I say, for the most part in general, babies know how to be born and moms know how to give birth. And what we, in our society, particularly in the United States, is we look at pregnant moms as a disease, and that we have to protect the baby from the mom and the mom from the baby attitude. Like they're out to destroy one another in pregnancy and birth. And that's not the case at all. They're made to be one unit, and they are one unit. The United States, doesn't have one word for mama baby like many other cultures do. Many other cultures have mama baby, and that is one word because it's seen as a unit. We don't have that here in the US. It's mama and baby. And they are seen as separate entities and not as that one unit that is made to work together in order to facilitate life and ongoing reproduction. And ongoing support of the human race in general, because it's not just about reproduction and life. It's also about attachment. It's about love. It's about bonding. It's about how to raise humans well, so that they can raise humans well. And instead of looking at these two separate entities that are enemies, which is how we try to play it in the Western world, we need to see that as a loving whole unit, that they are made to work together from conception on.
Yeah, and like you said, it's a unit, and vad heter det? The word when you cut the cord. Is it a problem there too? Because here in Sweden they want to cut the cord so quickly, and for me it's like the more I put myself into this, I mean it's a crime to start with, but it's also, I mean, you're cutting off the connection.
Yeah.
And I really think who allows you to do that? And it's so common, and it's like almost no one even think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it is a problem here as well, where they like to cut the cord right away. And if it's delayed cord clamping, they're like, oh yeah, we'll give it a couple minutes, you know, and it's like, wow, that's not nearly, that's not nearly enough, yeah, even if that baby gets all that blood from the blood that it needs from that placenta and that cord, there's still those stem cells that are traveling, and there's still that connection. I mean, the placenta hasn't even released, and it's like, oh, it's just like, just breathe, guys, it's okay. So we can leave everybody as one unit attached for a little bit, even when baby's on the outside.
It's actually, I mean, it's the most beautiful thing ever.
Mhm.
But I mean, I work as a doula too, and for me it's hard to be in the hospitals.
Oh, I can
Um,
imagine.
it's so the last job as a doula I did was actually more like you. I was the only person there at home
Okay.
with a couple who there was no midwife available, so. And
Aw.
that's actually, I mean, that was a game changer. I mean, it changed my view on this totally.
Yeah.
And when you watch that, it's hard to go into a hospital again.
Hmm.
Mm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I completely relate to that.
Mm. Oh, I'm so glad for this, Angee. And I mean, my God, what a favor you are doing to the humanity and to us women. And my heart is just filled with love for I mean, what you did.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It came as a very dear price. And still, but we are hopeful. We are hopeful that we're going to be able to get somewhere, and um yeah, we'll see what the future brings. It's really right now, a lot of after the trial has been recovery for myself and recovery for my family. We're still far away from recovering financially. Um, but we'll be getting there, and I have already worked with senator and the attorney general of our state, and helping because there's another midwife here in Nebraska who is getting prosecuted, or possibly she's getting harassed by the state, and they're trying to decide if they're going to go with prosecution or continue with prosecuting her. So we've been working on with her, and seeing where that goes as well. So there's rest, but there's no rest at the same time. So I've been taking the rest where I can, and that's where really a lot of prayer comes into place. And it's like, okay, Lord, I know where you've placed me. I know I don't know exactly all that you have for my future, but tell me the steps you want me to take. Let me know the podcast you want me to do. Let me know who you want me to meet with, to continue in this work, but also let me know who you don't and where I do need to step back and breathe and rest as well. So that's been a balancing act, but it has been very, it's gone very well. And, feeling a little bit of breath of fresh air, particularly these last couple months with my family. We were able to take some trips and things like that, which we hadn't done and for a while. And yeah, kind of regroup a little bit, and but yet still be working hard on this, because we don't want the fire to go out. We want to continue to strive forward to make change for our families.
It took a lot of courage to do what you did and are doing.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And I wish you the best of luck, and I will continue looking for what is happening in Nebraska and with you. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And thank you again for having me on this podcast. I am so honored to be here and to speak to your listeners. And thank you for sharing my story and my passion. Thank you for sharing yours as well with the world and being a voice out there as well.
Thank you.